Hey kiddos, welcome to some more drawing conclusions practice. We're going to go ahead and practice with this PowerPoint. So make sure that you have a piece of paper and a pencil or a whiteboard and a marker so that you can follow along. Your test that you will take this week on Prudy's problem will have a ton of drawing conclusion questions. So it's super important that you understand what drawing conclusions are. You must remember that in drawing conclusions, the answers are not directly in the story. You have to make an educated guess, meaning if you don't know the right answer, you are going to have to reread that story and reread that story until you do know the answer. So again, drawing conclusions, the answers are not going to be directly in the story. You have to be a detective and try to figure out what are they asking you about. So let's go ahead and get started for today. So what does it mean to draw a conclusion? I kind of mentioned it, but do you guys know what it means to draw a conclusion? Well, to draw a conclusion means you're making an educated guess. You're taking the material that you do know and you're using those clues to make a guess about where they may be, what color they might be wearing, what task they are doing. So it's not going to exactly tell you in the story. You're going to have to take the clues to figure those things out. So let's go ahead and practice. Follow along with me as I read you this story. "Alex," called Mrs. Sloan over and over. Other shoppers looked concerned and started looking for the lost child. Then a young woman came around the corner holding Alex's hand. "I found him in the candy section," she said. All right, here's our question. What conclusion can you draw about where Mrs. Sloan is? Now, nowhere in the story does it say Mrs. Sloan is at the zoo or Mrs. Sloan is at the library. You have to use the clues from the story to determine where she is. So here's our choices. Is she at the supermarket, at the bookstore, or at the mall? So what kind of clues would help you determine where she is at? Well, let's look. We have shoppers. Where would you find shoppers? Well, that's not super helpful. All those things, a supermarket, a bookstore, and a mall, they all have shoppers. So that isn't super helpful, but I see in there that I found him in the candy section. I think that's a huge clue. Where would you find someone in a candy section? Would that be A, B, or C? Write your answer down on the piece of paper. All right, so the only place that would have a candy section would be choice A. You're not going to have a candy section at a bookstore, and you're probably not going to have the candy section at the mall. Plus, there's lots of stores at the mall. So a supermarket is one large store. So that's kind of how you figure that one out. All right, kiddos, let's try another one. Follow along with me as I read this to you. Robbie excitedly tore the bright red wrapping paper off the box. Instead of the science kit he had been hoping for, he saw that the box was from Kohl's. He took off the lid to find a brown sweater inside. So what conclusion can you draw about how Robbie is feeling? So it says Robbie excitedly tore the bright red wrapping paper off the box. Instead of the science kit he had been hoping for, he saw that the box was from Kohl's. He took the lid off the lid to find a brown sweater inside. So after reading that, how do you think Robbie feels? What are some clues that we can use to determine that? Well, here's our answer. A, happiness. B, surprise, or C, disappointment. Which one of those things do you think he's feeling? Now, first you have to determine the clues. Nowhere in the story does he say he's happy or that he's surprised or that he's disappointed. We must start looking at our clues. Well, one of the clues is he instead of a science kit, he has a box from Kohl's. So let's think about this. If you really wanted something and you open it up and here's this box from Kohl's, how would you feel about that? And then he took open the lid, and in the lid was a brown sweater. Well, how would you feel if you had a brown sweater? So we're taking those clues and we're making an educated guess about how he's feeling because, again, in the story, it doesn't tell us. So on your paper, do you think it's A, happiness, B, surprise, or C, disappointment? Well, the correct answer there is C. He's feeling disappointed. If you want a gift and you don't get it, how would you feel? You're going to feel disappointed. All right, kiddos, let's go ahead and follow along as I read you this one. As the final notes played, Nancy glided gracefully to a stop and posed with her arms above her head. The crowd erupted in cheers. Nancy collected the flowers that people had thrown onto the ice for her. What conclusion can you draw about what Nancy is? So we're trying to figure out what she is. So it says there, Nancy glided gracefully to a stop. She posed with her arms above her head. A crowd is cheering for her. She collected flowers that was thrown on the ice. So we have to use those clues to figure out what she is. Well, let's look at our choices. We have A, dancer, B, a figure skater, or C, a musician. So if I look at here, she glided gracefully to a stop and posed with her arms above her head. Well, that's not going to be a musician. You're not going to be graceful when you're a musician. You're not going to pose your arms like above your head. You're not going to do those things. So that leaves A or B. So please write down what you think the answer is. Do you think she is a dancer? Or do you think she is a figure skater? The biggest clue here to this is the ice. Ice is a huge clue to what this one's going to be. So the answer is a figure skater. Figure skaters are people who skate on ice. All right, let's do another one. All right, I would like you to write down on your piece of paper or your whiteboard, what does it mean to draw a conclusion? So on your test, if the test question says draw a conclusion, what does that really mean to you? What does it mean to you? Write that down on your paper. Well, on your paper, you should have written that it means to make an educated guess. You have to take your clues and you have to make an educated guess. That's what it means to draw a conclusion. So again, when you take your reading test in a couple days, you need to understand that when it says a conclusion, the answer will not be in the story. You have to take the clues and then make an educated guess. All right, let's do another one. It is a bright, sunny day. Tasha is wearing a new skirt. Her new blue backpack is full of the school supplies that her mother bought last week. Tasha is feeling excited and a little nervous. All right, let's see what the question says. The question says, what conclusion can you draw about what day it is? And let's look at our choices. So the first choice is the first day of school. The second choice is the last day of school. And the last choice C there, is Tasha's birthday. So nowhere in the story did it say what day it was. We have to use the clues. So we know it was a bright, sunny day. Well, that doesn't really help us, okay? Because that could be any of those days that we could have a bright, sunny day. So let's dig deeper into our clues. She's wearing a new skirt. Well, when do you typically get new clothes? That could be several of them. I could get new clothes for the first day of school. I could get new clothes for my birthday. I don't typically think you would have new clothes for the last day of school. Maybe you do, but typically probably not. So let's look at some more clues because we really can't make a decision yet. Her new blue backpack is full of school supplies that her mother bought last week. When do we typically get new school supplies? That's a huge clue. So when do you typically get new school supplies? Well, you probably don't ask for brand new crayons or brand new markers for your birthday. Or, hey, Mom, I want a brand new glue stick. So we have to think about our clues and then make a decision about what day it is. So let's look and see. Which one do you think? Write down, do you think it's A? Do you think it's B? Or do you think it's C? All right, that correct answer there, that's going to be the first day of school, okay? That pretty much, getting the brand new school supplies, that pretty much tells us it was the first day of school. All right, kiddos, here's our next one. So the next one says, Maria threw the flat stone toward the lake. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She called to her dad. That's a new record for me. Then she went to search for more flat stones. What conclusion can you draw about what Maria is doing? So nowhere in there did it say Maria is doing what. So it didn't tell us. It didn't tell us she was like baking or biking or anything like that. We have to use the clues. So let's look at what we have here. Is she collecting rocks? B, is she skipping stones? Or C, is she making big splashes? So let's look at our clues. It says that Maria threw flat stones toward the lake. Well, she's throwing the stones into the lake. Well, if you're collecting rocks, are you going to throw your rocks into the lake? No, that doesn't make any sense, right? If you're collecting rocks, you're going to keep the rocks because you're keeping them for collection. So we can cross off A. There's no way she's collecting rocks if she's throwing them into the lake. So that leaves B and C. So make your choice. Do you think she is skipping rocks or do you think she's making big splashes? Well, your correct answer there was B. She's skipping rocks. If you've never skipped a rock before, you take a skinny rock and you throw it into the water a certain way and you hope that it makes these little jumps. That's what skipping rocks are. And so that is what she is doing. All right, kiddos, here's our next one. Chris put on the shirt and left the small room to show his mother. Too big, she said, and handed him another shirt to try. Chris sighed as he started to pull the shirt over his head. All right, let's see what question they're asking. What conclusion can you draw about where Chris is? So now we're looking for where he is. So let's look at our choices. Is he at the supermarket? Is he at a toy store? Or is he at a clothes store? So the first sentence says, Chris put on the shirt. So he's putting on a shirt. He left the small room to show his mother. So if you've ever tried on clothes at a store before, typically you go to a dressing room, right? And you try on your clothes. So that would be a small room. Well, you're probably not going to try on clothes at a toy store because at a toy store they would not have clothes, they would have toys, right? So that means that's going to leave choices A and C. So which one do you think he is at? Do you think he's at the supermarket or do you think he's at a clothing store? All right, so the answer you should have chosen was C. He's definitely at a clothing store. His mom told him the shirt was too big, so he's trying on those clothes at a clothing store. All right, kiddos, so what does it mean to draw a conclusion? Write that back down on your piece of paper or on your whiteboard. So if you get a question on your reading test in a couple days, what does it mean to draw a conclusion? Well, of course, to draw a conclusion, like we've been saying, means to make an educated guess. You have to take the clues. You have to take what they give you, and you have to make an educated guess about it. Nowhere in the story, okay, nowhere. You're not going to find the direct answer in the story about drawing conclusions. You have to make an educated guess about what you are reading. All right, kiddos, that's the end of our practice for today. Please make sure that you really understand this PowerPoint because you are going to have these questions. There's probably 5 or 6 of them this week on drawing conclusions on your reading test. If you want to watch this video again, do it again. If you struggled, that would be awesome. But please remember that drawing conclusions means that you're going to make an educated guess. You are going to take your clues like a detective and then make that guess about what would be correct. All right, kiddos, until next time, see you later.